I was just in shock because I didn't think it was gonna happen. Guy called me and was like, "Hey, this may happen." Hour later, it happened. I was very shocked. And when he left, that really wow. That hurt.
DK Metcalf is in a very tough situation. I mean, we've talked about this in the past in regards to the 2019 wide receivers. And the one thing I never quite understood is why out of all wide receivers, we're not hearing much from DK Metcalf. As a matter of fact, we're only hearing stuff from Deebo Samuel. We heard a little bit of noise from AJ Brown, but from the DK Metcalf front, it was very quiet. Well, at least up until now. Now, before we get to the content, just want to let you guys know we're making a very big push on my Patreon account, dropping exclusive documentaries, giving you early access to content, and it also gives you the ability to support me for when my content gets claimed by YouTube. It's patreon.com/microphone. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, I feel like you might get a little triggered by this analysis, but try your best to at least be a little realistic with your situation right now, and I'm sure you'll understand why DK Metcalf is in the situation that he currently is in. The 2019 wide receiver class was so filled with talent, and to be honest, it wasn't expected to be as remarkable as it became. It wasn't necessarily a very hyped up class at the time. What the 2019 wide receiver class was known for was wide receivers that were really physical and also just had remarkable athleticism. I mean, Deebo Samuel was already known as a speed demon coming out of college. DK Metcalf was literally a bodybuilder coming out of college. And then ultimately you had this beautiful wide receiver class filled with the likes of Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, Mecole Hardman, DK Metcalf, and Deontay Johnson. And now we're in this situation where a lot of these wide receivers, especially after seeing how much money Christian Kirk got paid, and then eventually how much money Devontae Adams got paid, which resulted in Tyreek Hill getting paid more, which just started this gigantic domino effect in the NFL during the offseason, which eventually would see the likes of AJ Brown getting traded from the Tennessee Titans to the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Tennessee Titans opting to select Treylon Burks instead, just so they could cut costs because they didn't want to pay AJ Brown a $25 million a year salary. We're now in this situation where all these wide receivers are seeking a payday. And so far, the only answer we have to the situation is in regards to AJ Brown. Now, for Deebo Samuel, his situation is way simpler. I mean, he clearly just came out from a breakout season where he was used as a wide receiver and a running back, had the greatest year of his young career with 1,400 yards receiving and 8 rushing TDs. And ultimately, he tried to leverage that into a situation where he could get a gigantic contract extension from the San Francisco 49ers. But the thing you have to understand about Deebo Samuel's situation is if he doesn't end up getting a contract extension, he's returning to a similar atmosphere. Yes, his quarterback is going to probably, at least we're assuming, is going to change from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, which barring something unforeseen, that is the way the 49ers are going to continue forward. But it's something that the 49ers have been planning for over a year now. Deebo is going to return to a stable environment where he could produce just as much as he did last year, unless the 49ers decide to reduce his role a little bit and elevate Brandon Ayuk's role a little bit. For the most part, you could assume that Deebo Samuel is going to return to a situation where he could prove that he is worth a gigantic contract. The same could be said about wide receivers like Terry McLaurin. It's really weird to say this as a football fan, but he is getting an upgrade at the quarterback position. Yes, I know it's from Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz, but first of all, Terry McLaurin's balled out no matter who his quarterback has been, but Terry McLaurin's going to return to a situation where he could produce once again. But in AJ Brown's situation, you could say the same exact thing. If he didn't get traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, he would have returned to the Tennessee Titans, and once again, he would have been in the same situation where he could perform again. But the thing is, DK Metcalf doesn't have any of those things going for him, unfortunately. Unlike his collegiate teammate AJ Brown, DK Metcalf Metcalf's situation has been significantly altered. And if you aren't already concerned about DK Metcalf's ability to produce without Russell Wilson, he himself is already kind of shaken up by his situation. In March, he came out and said that I never thought that Russell Wilson was going to leave the Seattle Seahawks. He said this on Kevin Garnett's podcast. He said, I was just in shock because I didn't think it was going to happen. I was very shocked because I never thought he was going to leave Seattle. So in my mind, it's like, Russ is gone. What do I do? Later on that night, Bobby Wagner gets cut. And me and Bobby were close. Like, that was my guy. And when he left, that really hurt because we would work out every Tuesday. I would go over to his crib. We would play pool. That was my big brother. And he's gone now. So I know he taught me a lot. And I'm going to take that going into the next season and the rest of my years in the NFL. But he was like a real big brother to me while I was in the league. Now, he did also close this out by saying, I think it's time for me to step up and be a leader. It's my time in Seattle now, and that's the way I look at it. Now, we do have a small sample size as to what we could expect in regards to DK Metcalf's production without Russell Wilson. And bear in mind, this is a small sample size with quarterbacks like Geno Smith starting for the Seattle Seahawks, who very well could be the starting quarterback for the Seahawks this year. So here's how DK Metcalf's games went last year without Russell Wilson as his QB. In week 6 versus Pittsburgh, he was targeted 7 times. He brought in 6 receptions for 58 yards and didn't record a TD. The week after, he was targeted 5 times. He brought in 2 receptions for 96 yards and 1 touchdown. To be honest, most of that yardage came up against the New Orleans Saints on one play, obviously. But this is where you could start to see a little bit of a trend. In week 8 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was targeted 6 times, had 6 receptions for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then week 9 versus the Green Bay Packers was when Russell Wilson would return and DK Metcalf wasn't nearly as productive. So it's really difficult to say how successful DK Metcalf could be for sure with either Geno Smith or Drew Lock as his quarterback. When Geno Smith took over, you didn't necessarily see DK Metcalf get targeted as much on deep football. So what am I trying to get to here? DK Metcalf is in a very uncomfortable situation in the sense that he is on a team that is really trying to establish themselves as a run-first team. I mean, if you don't believe me, the Seattle Seahawks once again drafted a running back in the 2nd round of this year's NFL draft. Yes, I know it's getting kind of annoying to see the Seahawks draft as many running backs as they did. Yes, of course, it was with their second round pick, but when you're a rebuilding team, you don't necessarily want to see your team spend draft capital on running backs, especially 2nd round picks. If it was a 4th round pick, that's a different story. And I think their 1st round pick of Charles Cross was brilliant. What I'm trying to say is, if you're DK Metcalf right now, you're going into the season without your Pro Bowl caliber QB. It's also your contract year. So clearly you're going to have a downgrade at the quarterback position. Now, it's important to note and to credit DK Metcalf, he's had a remarkable career so far. His rookie season, he was 100 yards away from 1,000 yards. His sophomore season, he broke out for 1,303 receiving yards. And last year, he was just shy of 1,000 yards once again. So I don't want to discredit this man because he's been fantastic in the NFL thus far, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that he is actually primed for, what's the opposite of a breakout season? I guess a break-in season, or I don't know. He's primed to have a little bit of a slump this year, considering how his quarterback isn't necessarily going to be Russell Wilson. Well, you know, Drew Lock could flourish with the Seattle Seahawks, although I'm going to be honest, I'm not so confident that that's going to happen. Geno Smith has proven to be a formidable game manager, and if he has good preparation, maybe he'll be able to successfully manage games, but that doesn't necessarily translate to statistical output for DK Metcalf. And I think the biggest evidence for all of this is the fact that DK Metcalf was nowhere to be found for mandatory minicamp so far. As contract talks have not yet resulted in a new deal, he continues to rehab his injury in Los Angeles. So look, this could be nothing. It could just be DK Metcalf trying to rehab his injury and feeling more confident and comfortable rehabilitating his injury in Los Angeles, or this could be him protesting that he wants a brand new contract. Which, if you're DK Metcalf in this situation, if you're primed for a bit of a down year, it makes a lot of sense for you to try to do this for yourself. Considering the fact that the Seattle Seahawks currently have almost $14 million in cap space, they're set to have the 3rd third most cap space in the 2023 season, they definitely could retain DK Metcalf. But should they? If you're thinking about it, does it make a lot of sense to keep your almost 3-time 1,000-yard receiver during the entirety of a rebuild where his value is just going to diminish more and more? Wouldn't it make more sense to trade it to a wide receiver needy team for future first-round picks? I mean, if you're rebuilding, that's what makes the most sense to me. And you have a bunch of teams that are in desperate need for a true defined playmaker as a wide receiver one. Yes, the Green Bay Packers already have their contingency plans in place with Sammy Watkins and Christian Watson, and they already have Alan Lazard, which they're comfortable with. I think they'd be more comfortable if they were able to give up a future first or second round pick and bring in DK Metcalf onto that roster instead. I mean, if you look at teams that are in desperate need of a wide receiver one, my favorite team that pops to mind is probably the New England Patriots. They have the cap space to pay DK Metcalf. They probably want to get Mac Jones a true wide receiver one. DK Metcalf is remarkable in run blocking. Bill Belichick loves wide receivers like that. I think that's probably my favorite to trade for DK. And honestly, apart from that team, I can't really think of other teams that could trade for him. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to say, what about the Chiefs or what about the Packers? But I don't think the Chiefs or the Packers have the cap space to sign DK Metcalf for a long-term contract. But needless to say, it should be interesting, and it is something that we're going to be following closely on this channel. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this situation. Do you think the Seattle Seahawks are going to trade DK Metcalf? Should they sign him to a large contract extension despite going through a rebuild? Yeah, maybe it's going to suck for this year with Drew Lock, but all you know, when they finally do get their quarterback of the future, it will be nice to have a player like DK Metcalf on the roster. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.